Welcome back, everyone. Today, it's a pretty damn serious story. This is one of the ones that actually does move the needle in the industry. PlayStation studios are being decimated right now. 900 staff across their studios are being laid off. And this is on top of all of the job losses that we talked about at Sony last year, right? So this is another 8% on top of that. Many studios have been hit, many titles have been hit, an entire studio has been shut down, and as this was happening, unbeknownst to the team, mere days before this would be announced, the departing CEO was enjoying a fun party in London. He was almost certainly one of the few people with any idea, that this was coming, which is rough. But now the projects that he oversaw are in tatters. I think staff and customers are both basically wondering what the hell is next. And if they can recognize any patterns, they'll know it's paying our wages with today's sponsor. Boot.dev/Bellular News. Here's the deal. They're going to teach you back-end web development, which is an amazing skill. In this case, they'll be using Python and Go, and they'll be doing it the smart way by making it fun. That's because BootDev is an online, self-paced platform that's 100% designed to get you writing code, and not just any code. You'll actually be working through RPG-inspired problems, and BootDev itself has got quests, levels, XP, and achievements, and you can get 25% off your first purchase with my link and code. Now, I've talked a lot about their pragmatic approach to teaching, but another thing that's fantastic is how pro-consumer they are. 30-day, no questions asked money-back policy, and for each course, they've got a free interactive demo, and they've even went so far as to have all of their content be free to read and watch. If you want the interaction, then that's what a paid membership is for. But that means you can easily check out all that they are about, see if it's a learning path that interests you, and when you're ready, well, you can sign up and you'll be writing a whole ton of code and doing so in a way that is designed to actually teach you the foundational skills you'll use on the job. It's not a get-rich-quick thing, it is actually learning code the proper way. Personally, look, I started learning code 12 years ago at university, and I wish Boot existed back then. It's just a better way of doing things. So you can check them out today at boot.dev/Bellular News, where code Bellular News gets you 25% off your first purchase, of course backed by their no questions asked 30-day money-back guarantee. So that's Boot. Thanks to them for supporting the channel. Let's roll. Okay, so 5 days ago, the outgoing leader, Jim Ryan, was celebrating with staff from PlayStation's London studio, and today, in a single bullet point in an email, he announced that that London studio would be closed down. There is pretty much no way that he didn't know that would be happening while he was, of course, here with all of these people that are no longer with a job. And it's one of those things where, yep, I get it. I get how information has got to be managed at the corporate level, and I get that the party being scheduled is probably a separate thing, but goddamn, is that not an absolutely brutal look. So what we've got from this is 2 separate blog posts from PlayStation, and those have outlined the future of Sony's gaming group. So there was first one from Jim Ryan that was detailing the global impact of things, and then there was one from Herman Hulst, which was basically going into the details with the impacted PlayStation studios. So let's just go and talk about what this involves. Number 1, 8% layoffs, around 900 people worldwide, and that brings the games industry total this year to 7,000. We are just at the end of February. In the totality of 2023, at least insofar as big public layoffs went, we had 10,500. As you can see, 2024 has only been accelerating. Now, Jim Ryan sent out an email in the morning basically detailing that they've been working and discussing these layoffs for months. So yeah, he knew, he literally said it in the email, and he called these layoffs inevitable as a result of change in the industry. And that's something we're going to be getting into, because a core point you're going to find out is, for many, it actually doesn't matter how well their games sell. It's really not at all to do with the profit or loss situation in their own studio. It's an entirely a bigger scale thing, and that's one of the inherent downsides of consolidation. We'll get into that later. To actually go into some of the details here, this will impact the general PlayStation corporate structure, their technology, creative, and support elements, but also game teams. So here's what's happened to the game teams. First up, PlayStation's London studio is going to be closed, and Ethan Gatch in his newsletter, I suppose from his sources, alleged that this decision was split between either them or Media Molecule. Now, Media Molecule, you'll know them from, say, Dreams, right? Little Big Planet. So I'd say less of a high-volume sales group, although a lot of their games did do well. I think they were more of a kind of like creative sort of tentpole. So I can understand why they would be more in the firing line, but still, that is rough. Ultimately, the London studio is gone, though. There are also layoffs at Fir Sprite Studios, at Insomniac Games, Naughty Dog, Guerrilla Games, apparently 10% of the studio, which is 40 staff, according to a Dutch newspaper called AD. So, you know, it's not quite Horizon Zero devs, but it's certainly not good. And with Insomniac, that's where things get specifically interesting, because we, of course, have the Insomniac leaks. And in the Insomniac leaks that came out in and around December, we learned a lot of the CEO's thinking about what this sort of strategic reduction in force would actually mean for the company and the specific impact it would have on games. As in, these are the people who will go, we will have to scale down these things and bring people in from those projects. We'll get into that, but yes, it does seem the sorts of fears expressed in those leaked, those leaked documents, they're absolutely true. Let's talk a little bit about the why. A few days ago, we covered the PlayStation part of Sony's financial reporting. If you want more details, you can check it out. A bit of a TLDR is that Sony are seeing narrowing margins, right? I mean, I think their margin was 6% most recently. In times gone by, that's been more like 12%. They're essentially seeing that console sales are slowing down. They're a little bit actually behind the curve of some past console cycles, even though the PS5 is obviously dominant. Essentially, they were shifting lots of PS5s, just not as much as they would have hoped, and they were, of course, having to lean into discounting, and when you do that, you reduce your margin. And a lot of the basic unit economics don't seem to be as they were in the PS4 generation, so it actually seems like the sort of discount floor, like the break-even point, it just seems that that's not as low as it used to be in the past. So essentially, their hardware margins are getting smaller, they're entering the 5th year of the PlayStation life cycle, and they basically need to reassess, their plans, how things are actually going. We've seen with Microsoft that Game Pass has been pretty stagnant in its growth. It appears that's also the same for PS Plus. So nobody's really doing amazing here, even the people who are out ahead. This wave of layoffs, this is coming after there was a mass layoff at Bungie last year and multiple rounds of layoffs at other PlayStation studios, like, say, Media Molecule, and of course other cancelled projects. So clearly, what has came was the scalpel, admittedly a rather rusty one. Now, though, this is absolutely the hammer. And, Herman Hulst talked about this. He said, "We looked at our studios and our portfolio, evaluating projects in various stages of development, and we've decided some of those will not move forward." Some of his wording here is actually, I think good and reasonable. He says, "I want to be clear that the decision to stop work in these projects is not a reflection on the talent or passion of team members. Our philosophy has always been to allow creative experimentation." Certainly, they're fairly strong with that. A lot of people would think about maybe the PS1 era and think, I wish we were back to that type of creative experimentation, but, it is what it is. He goes on to say that sometimes great ideas don't make great games. Sometimes a project is started with the best of intentions before shifts within the market or industry result in a change of plan. Or, if you're Warner Brothers Games, having the Unalive Squad kill the Batman, and yep, I did have to say that because yesterday's video got temporarily demonetized for naming that IP. How funny. While those words are good, I think the idea that, a good idea doesn't always make a good game, that's an important thing for us to kind of understand as an industry, but obviously that will be of very little comfort to the people who are impacted here. Now, it is worth noting with the studios involved, some of them do have a history of VR. Fir Sprite, right? They done some VR stuff. They were asked to make some live service titles. So Fir Sprite were doing that. PlayStation London were looking into that. There's also studios who are clearly, making multiple projects and would have the money to fund themselves based on the success of their games. Essentially what I'm saying is studios that would be net contributors, like Insomniac Games, like Guerrilla, right? Now in those former cases, It is basically plans changing and those studios just not being what they need. I mean, London Studios, that went from being a VR team to working on a live service fantasy title. And again, the journalist Ethan Gatch found via some of his sources anyway, that game was not in a great state. Here's what he wrote for Kotaku. It was working on a multiplayer live service game that I'm told was still years off because of delays and challenges of, pivoting a team from VR to an entirely new genre. Which doesn't seem like the best of decisions, but again, we know what it was like at Sony over the last little while. They decided to go all in on live services. They moved all their chips there. I think it was 12 projects by fiscal year. It was either fiscal or calendar 2026, and of course, most recently, we've learned that has been halved to a target of 6 games. Ouch. Now, the idea that these layoffs could happen, that's obviously something that we have known about, and that's why it's time for us to talk a little bit about the Insomniac Games leak, where, a lot of people at the time were saying, no, don't report in the leak, you're supporting, the hackers and stuff, but look, a lot of the information we got from that leak is really important to what's actually going on in the industry, so we do need to talk about it. So let's go to this summation of the documents that they were able to look at from Kotaku. Presentations earlier in the year point to a rough projected headcount of 500 moving forward, but a September email from Sony specified a full-time employee max headcount of 470, down from the current estimated 485. PowerPoint slides from a September presentation reference 6 potential areas to reduce headcount, including a few layoffs, not backfilling certain positions, and placing up to 5 employees on performance improvement plans, which of course basically mean improve or you shall be yoked. That was going on, but they also reported this. Now, this is attributed to Ted Price, and Ted Price is the founder of Insomniac Games, and this is the bit that will really seem rough, and this will make it clear, right? This will make it clear how these layoffs actually impact you guys, because I keep on, sometimes you see in the comments, people are saying, oh, whatever, who cares, knowledge workers, blah, 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 but you probably should care if you like video games because this will impact them. This is what the founder said. Slimming down Ratchet and cutting new IP will not account for the reductions Sony is looking for. So the next Ratchet game being a bit gutted, cutting down future aspirations ain't enough. He goes on to say to remove 50 to 75 people strategically. Now, again, 50 to 75, if we're looking at 10% and the projected headcount was 485, then, we're almost on the money there. He says to remove 50 to 75 people strategically, our best option is to cut deeply into Wolverine and Spider-Man 3, replacing lower performers with team members from Ratchet and new IP. So, right, let's actually kind of break this down. Wolverine is something that if it goes well, could be a Spider-Man-sized success. And we all know how much Spider-Man Miles Morales, and then the sort of remaster, PS5 version of Spider-Man, we know how well those did. So, I mean, look, you can readily see the impact that this will have on the games that you may be able to play. And of course, when we're talking about the lower performers there, remember, lower just means relative to whatever team. Low does not necessarily mean bad. Low could mean average within the context of a team of high performers. Low could mean somebody who is still training up on the job, who is still gaining their skills, who maybe in 2 years, if they have the right support and a good working environment, could be a high performer. But the point is, when the cuts are that large, they have to come from somewhere, and this is the impact it'll have. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but Michael, it's about the money. You're right, it is about the money. The hacks also revealed the financial success of companies like Guerrilla Games and Insomniac. The core thing there is, these are profitable projects. Like, we even heard Spider-Man 2 cost, 300 million, 320 million. It would need to hit 7.2 million sales in order to break even, and it had been at, I think, 6 when that was reported. Now that game is, it's over 10 million sales. So these are companies who are net beneficiaries, and now they are cutting down the studios that are beneficiaries to their own finances because they need to shore up the finances now, even though I think we could all see the damaging Guerrilla and Insomniac will obviously impact the future. As for Guerrilla, yep, they've also been hit. Remember, Zero Dawn sold 24.3 million, Forbidden West sold 8.4 million, 33 million units in that IP. Also, like a multiplayer game coming out in that IP, 40, but no, they lose 40 people. And the point here is that success will not save you whenever your unit is being decimated. That is the brutal part of it. And to not go on a tangent, but when you look at a lot of the psychological literature when it comes to things like how much people value their work, burnout, all those things that are actually important, the lack of control, or like perceived control over one's circumstances and destiny, that is one of the number one things that contributes to burnout. And obviously, burnout damages the games that we end up having the opportunity to purchase. Now, going to the overall state of affairs, basically, you can't look at this and basically think that this is just them hard pumping the brakes on some of the plans over the last few years. So you've got Naughty Dog canceling their live service title. You've got multiple studios rumored to be working on those live service titles for PlayStation. Those are all getting hits. This is only a week after PlayStation actually announced they would be opening up PSVR 2 to PC in order to increase the volume of games for that system. And I mean, it's pretty obvious what that means. It means PSVR 2 ain't doing well, could be doing better, and if they are moving their VR studios into live services and then cutting those studios, yeah, we maybe aren't going to be expecting the best first-party support for PSVR 2 moving forward. So this is a consolidation play. It is going away from new IP, away from new creativity, and into the safer bets. Now, of course, they're not canceling all their live services. They're still doing multiplayer titles. There are many projects they're super deeply invested in that will continue to be a thing. But what we are seeing is the last grasps of the old era where too much cost has been sunk, and it's beyond the point of the sunk cost fallacy. Now, they still do have some hits like Helldivers, but again, with Helldivers, many would say that could have went either way, that it's maybe not the most bankable thing, given it was a transition in game format. Of course, we'll likely find out more when we hear about, titles like, say, Concord from Firewalk Studios. Now, of course, we'll likely find out more whenever these staff actually start talking to the press. Now, we already know that some of that's happened from Jason Schreier's sources. As of the time of writing, the Horizon multiplayer game and Fir Sprite's original IP, which is rumored to be a AAA survival horror title, those are safe. But Fir Sprite are seeing some other stuff be impacted. As an example, Twisted Metal, which itself was taken from Lucid Studios and given to them, it has been cancelled. But again, you look at it like, really? A Twisted Metal live service? Who thought that that was a good idea? So clearly the core plan is changing here. And actually, Herman kind of talks to that. This is what he said. Delivering the immersive, narrative-driven stories that PlayStation Studios is known for at the quality bar we aspire to requires a reevaluation of how we operate. So that's fairly interesting then. They're still going to be doing those like Sony-style games, but again, I even think some of that's called into question whenever Insomniac and Guerilla are actually being impacted, right, by those job cuts. Now, we're likely, of course, going to see a bigger push to cloud, to mobile, to streaming, to PC releases, because, look, it's pretty simple. Every company is caring about their bottom line now. Money tomorrow is not as important as money right now for them, and I think that's just something that's, it's bloody well self-evident. Now, of course, a lot of this is because parts of the industry are changing. That's what Jim Ryan said. And to go to some commentary from Matt Piscatella, he works for Circana. Now, you previously will have known of NPD Group. Basically, he's been an industry analyst for a long ass time, and he knows his shit. He said, fundamental changes in the US console space I've seen. Player counts and hours played topped out in 2021. Obviously, we can think of a pretty big global event that may have made 2021 a spike. Play dominated by a small group of very established black hole games. I'm at least taking that as being the likes of, say, your League of Legends, Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, like just the sorts of forever games that people just play forever and forever and forever, which in many cases are live services, but they're the live service incumbents that like so many people have spent so many, hundreds of millions trying and failing to dethrone. He says the new game releases are carrying more risk than ever, new IPs even more risk, that spend growth has flatlined, that models meant to drive growth like virtual reality, like subscription services have had low to moderate success, that cloud hasn't expanded much beyond base console users, that its use is mainly focused on trials, and that there's just a lot of consumer pressure because video game money is probably going to be second to food money and housing money. So fundamentally, things are basically changing. A lot of the bets that these big companies made 5 years ago are not paying off or are not surefire anymore. Therefore, they're just taking their money, taking their, sort of spend they've committed to. They're just taking it out of those plays, putting into safer places, and trying to trim every little bit of fat that they find. But the thing is, if you're always just trying to trim the fat, who's to say you don't end up cutting into the bone and doing real, true, everlasting damage? That is going to be the worry when you look at something like Insomniac. Yeah, they've done great now, but if the next Ratchet & Clank game is basically getting deep cuts, if Wolverine is getting deep cuts, if Spider-Man 3 is getting deep cuts, and they're losing people, and new IP are getting cuts, I mean, is that a recipe for success? Will that set Insomniac up to still have that same amazing track record that they've had in recent years? Probably not. And that is it for today's video. That's basically the situation. Man, it bloody well sucks. And unfortunately, there will be more on this later on. So that's it for me today. Thanks to today's sponsor. As you can probably tell, I mean, like literally sponsors are members. That literally pays for our wages. It has more of an impact than YouTube AdSense does, and that's what allows us to keep doing the show. So we thank them for it. Okay, that's it for me. Have a good day. See you next time.